You know, it doesn't matter whether you've been doing OD for 30 days or for 30 years, or some of you watching this maybe even longer than that. The basic question is, where did OD come from? A lot of the stuff that we take for granted, like survey feedback and group dynamics and leaderless groups and all the stuff that we do, we just take for granted. But there was a time, I know it's hard to believe, when nobody knew about this stuff. So a great question is, where did it come from? Isaac Newton, when he was talking about science, said, you know, we are very little people standing on the shoulders of giants. I think that's where we are with OD today. Those of us doing this work today, in a sense, are very little people standing on the shoulders of giants. So I want to look with you today for just a little while on who are some of those giants that our work is based on. So here's a question. Who was the first OD consultant? The very first OD consultant? Well, I started thinking about this and I thought, you know, picture a group of Neanderthal people, ancient, prehistoric people, like out hunting the mastodon, and a bunch of people coming back, probably the men, a bunch of the guys, coming back into the cave after the mastodon hunt. And I can imagine one of them, like named Karg, let's say. Karg stands up around the campfire and he says, hey guys, you know what? There's got to be a better way to hunt these mastodons. You know, we lost a couple of guys out there today. Let's take a time out here and talk about this. Do you think we need different spears? Do you think maybe there's something about the teamwork and the way we're going about this? If you think about it, that was the very first socio-technical intervention in the field of OD. Now, fast forward to the Egyptians. You see, when the Nile River flooded every year, that's where the water came for all the crops. And then they had to put a dam to hold the water. Well, it meant that everybody had to have the same type of dam. If there was one weak spot all along the Nile, then the water would drain out and they'd lose their water. So there were these engineers who were consulting engineers. You'll see another famous one came along a lot later. And so the Egyptians had consultants who went around to ensure the quality of the various dams and the dikes that were being built. So in a sense, you could think of them as kind of consultants. Now actually, the very first recorded conversation, at least that I know of, that could be seen as an OD consultant speaking with a client is a conversation. It's a story about Moses in the Bible talking to Jethro, his father-in-law. Moses is leading the people of Israel across the wilderness, and he stops off to visit with his father-in-law Jethro, and he's having a conversation with Jethro, and he says, man, I'm going to paraphrase here. He says, man, I'm burnt out. I'm wiped out. I can't take this anymore. I've got people coming to me over and over and over again. I'm swamped. I don't have time to even turn around. What should I do? Now, Jethro is like an expert consultant. Of course, they haven't discovered process consultation or group dynamics at that point. So Jethro says to him, here's what you do, Moses. Take your very best people and put them in charge of 1,000. Take your next best people and put them in charge of 100. And your next best people and put them in charge of 10. He creates the hierarchical organization, which of course we now know and love. As far as I know, that's like one of the first conversations between a consultant and a client. Now, the kings and queens in medieval times, they also had people that were, how can we say it? They were able and willing to speak truth to power, an expression we use now. Who is somebody that has the courage to speak truth to power? Think of the court jesters. You know, these were the guys that wore the funny hats, and I'm assuming they were all men, and we don't know, that wore the funny hats and the funny outfits, and they would sit around the king and his court, the queen and her court, and every time the king or the queen would do something that was stupid, the court jester would jump up and would find some way to playfully, hopefully, playfully show the king or the queen that what they were doing was really stupid. And the king and queen would never kill the jester. It was like, hopefully, they never kill the jester. So the jester kind of had permission to speak the tough truth to the leader. Think of that as an example of the first kind of executive coaching done during the Middle Ages. So think about us now as being branches on a tree.